On this day in 1965, Joe McBride signed for Celtic. Born on the very day Celtic won the Empire Exhibition Cup in 1938, Joe McBride came to the club relatively late in his career, having made his name at Kilmarnock from 1957 to 59, before a spell in England with Wolves and Luton Town, where he failed to settle. He returned north to Partick Thistle in 1960, where he rediscovered his goal-scoring touch with 31 goals in 59 league matches, before moving to Motherwell in 1962, scoring 51 league goals in 88 matches. The lifelong Celtic fanatic probably sealed his switch to Celtic Park when the newly installed Jock Stein took his new charges to Hampden for the Scottish Cup semi-final against Motherwell on the 27th of March 1965. The 2-2 draw that day was no surprise, given Celtic had lost 2 and drawn 1 of their first 4 matches under Stein. But McBride proved a thorn in their side, particularly in the first half, when his 2 goals twice put Motherwell ahead to lead 2-1. It was more than his goals that caught the eye, Ger Henderson writing in the Evening Times of the 29th of March 1965. Andy Weir and Joe McBride were given some wonderful support by young George Murray when they had the wind as a help, and at times we got the impression we were watching a flashback to the vintage post-war years at Fir Park. Stein had seen enough, and Celtic made their move at the end of the season, but Motherwell rejected their £22,000 bid and faced the possibility of losing him after the Lanarkshire club accepted Dunfermline's £25,000 bid, which came with higher wages than Celtic were offering. It was only when McBride dug his heels in and refused to join Dunfermline that Motherwell relented and accepted Celtic's offer on the 4th of June. Peter Hendry reported in the Evening Times that day, McBride, who turned down a move to Dunfermline some weeks ago after the clubs had agreed on a £25,000 fee, told me, "I want to join Celtic. I can't see any snags cropping up when I go to Parkhead tomorrow for the talks with Mr. Stein." Hendry reported on the 5th of June 1965, Celtic and Motherwell had agreed on the fee before McBride and manager Bobby Howitt arrived at Celtic Park a few minutes after 10 o'clock today. Manager Howitt drove up first and said, "This should not take long." Seconds later, McBride's car appeared. McBride got out of the car, walked over and said, "This is it." 10 minutes after they had vanished through the entrance, it was all over. Joe McBride would spend just over 3 years at Celtic, and a year of that was spent out of the team with the serious knee injury that cost him the place in Lisbon that was surely his had he been fit. But his star burned brightly for that all-too-brief period before December 1966, when his season ended in such heartbreaking fashion. Celtic got off to a slow start in their League Cup sectional matches of 1965-66, but the season ignited with the first league match on the 25th of August, McBride scoring his first competitive goal for the club in a 4-0 win at Tannadice. Joe McBride's 43 goals in all domestic competitions helped fire Celtic to the League Cup and their first league title win for 12 years. He played his part too in a European run which came agonisingly close to the final of the European Cup Winners' Cup. McBride's late head flick at Anfield in the semi-final second leg, sending Bobby Lennox clear to score what should have equalised the tie at 2-2 and send Celtic through on the away goals rule. The referee later admitted he'd been wrong to disallow the goal for offside. Having scored a barrowload of goals in his first season, Joe McBride started the following like a wrecking ball, cutting a swathe through defences at home and abroad. He scored 2 goals on the road to Lisbon, the second after he had incurred the wrath of Jock Stein in France before the first leg against Nantes on the 30th of November 1966. Ian McCall writes in the official biography of Celtic, Nantes of France started like a whirlwind in their home tie, taking a 1-0 lead through Francis Marnier after 14 minutes. Joe McBride equalised 10 minutes later, justifying pre-match reports in the French sporting press that had raved about his scoring exploits, and evening things up with his manager after an unfortunate pre-match incident when he opened his kit bag in the dressing room to discover he had only 1 boot. Jock said to me to get a taxi back to the hotel, McBride says, and it was lying on the floor of the hotel, so I got the boot, came back, and Jock was still prancing up and down the dressing room. "Professional footballer, eh?" he kept saying. My head was down, so when I scored, I turned and looked at him and he shouted, "Aye, all right, all right." It was "you're forgiven" sort of thing, but before the match, I thought he was going to strangle me. In that incredible spell before the turn of the year, McBride couldn't stop scoring, and perhaps the highlight of his season was a 4-goal performance at Easter Road on the 8th of October 1966 as a roller-coaster first half in which both teams led ended with Celtic 4-2 ahead, Steve Chalmers scoring one on 30 minutes to add to McBride's hat-trick. By the time Alan McGraw scored a last-minute penalty for Hibs, McBride had grabbed his fourth and Celtic ran out 5-3 winners. McBride's reward was the first of only 2 Scotland caps, being selected in the team to face Wales on the 22nd of October. The 4 goals against Hibernian took Joe McBride's tally for the season to 21, and his final goal against Partick Thistle in a 6-2 win at Celtic Park on the 17th of December 1966 saw him on 36 goals, with 5 months of the season still to come. Sadly, the match against Aberdeen on Christmas Eve was Joe McBride's last match of the season, as a knee injury, which had been troubling him for some weeks, kept him out of the side to play Dundee United on New Year's Eve. It was some time before the seriousness of the injury was confirmed by Celtic, with newspaper reports as late as February 1967 speculating on whether this would be the week McBride returned to action. But following a complicated operation, he did not play again until the 23rd of December 1967, scoring a hat-trick in a 4-0 win over Morton at Capello. The injury meant that Joe McBride was robbed of a place in Lisbon, and while there's no guarantee he would have played, it seems inconceivable he would not have. When Jock Stein signed Willie Wallace in December 1967, it was not as a replacement for McBride, but a partner. Stein believed the two would form the most devastating strike pairing Scotland had ever seen, but sadly it was not to be. Ian McCall records a heartbreaking scene in the official biography of Celtic in the aftermath of the European Cup triumph. "I'll never forget going into the dressing room after the game," McBride says. "By the time we got into the dressing room, the boys were jumping about and kissing and cuddling, and I remember I was standing there and delighted for the boys, but so upset that I hadn't played that I was nearly in tears." I'll give Big Jock his due. He was a hard big man, but he could understand how you were feeling too. I remember him looking over and he caught my eye, saw me standing there and told me I should, for my own good, get right out of that dressing room. He knew how I was feeling and told me to come back in 10 minutes once I had calmed down. I asked him for a jersey, so he lifted a green and white jersey and gave it to me. So I went out and went to the inter-dressing room and chapped the door, which was shut. Herrera opened the door just enough to look out through a crack, and his face was close to mine. "McBride," he said softly. "Mr. Herrera, can I change a jersey?" I said. I said I'd like Brnick's jersey. So he said something in Italian, and Brnick's jersey came flying over. I caught it, and I handed him a Celtic jersey. It was hard for me then to find anywhere in and around the stadium that was quiet, but I did, and I just had a wee greet to myself. After his return from injury in December 1967, Joe McBride never again held down a regular starting place, although he still added to his huge tally, and as late as the 2nd of October 1968, he scored the final goal in Celtic's 4-0 win over St Etienne in the first round of the European Cup to turn around a 2-0 deficit from the first leg. Along with Steve Chalmers, he was picked out by Jock Stein as instrumental in the win, Stein telling the Evening Times of the 3rd of October 1968. "They had to do a job of constant chasing and harrying. I have never seen them run so hard or cover so much ground. These were the men who finally broke the French defence." By now past his 30th birthday, Jock Stein decided that it was time for McBride to move on for regular first-team football, and after he scored his last goal for Celtic in a 1-1 draw back at Capello on the 26th of October 1968, he was sold to Hibernian. Joe McBride wasn't finished yet, and in 3 seasons at Easter Road scored 44 league goals in 67 matches, while also becoming their record goal scorer in European competition. He inevitably scored against Celtic in their next match at Easter Road, a 5-2 win for the visitors on the 30th of November 1968. And after a McBride double, the first a wondrous volley high into the top corner from outside the box, gave Hibernian a 2-0 win over Celtic in September 1970, Jock Stein told him he'd made a mistake in allowing him to leave. Few Celtic players ever left such a mark on the club in so short a space of time as Joe McBride, or were ever so unfortunate with injury. One of the best tributes he was ever paid was by the legendary Jimmy McGrory, asked in 1975 to name his greatest Celtic 11. McGrory wrote of the man who scored 86 goals in just 94 matches for Celtic. "I have been asked to name the best Celtic centre-forward I've ever seen play, and the man I choose may surprise you. He's Joe McBride. He was a tremendous headerer of the ball and could take a half chance on the ground. And his heart was in the right place."